Hi, and welcome to our series of HDR supervisor notes. These are, short little segments designed to provide information for PhD and master's research degree supervisors, just to help you all with the various processes involved with setting up student projects and right through to when they get examined and completed. Today, I just want to focus on some of the processes and practices around nomination of examiners. And this is a really key thing towards the end of each student's candidature. They get ready to submit that thesis. You have to come up with some people to examine it. Now, the universities recently updated web resources for HDR supervisors. And look, and there's the web address. Ask Research HDR-supervisors, and you can find a whole bunch of information online, but I do appreciate it can be difficult to find that sometimes, and sometimes the information isn't always quite up to date, as I've discovered in the preparation of this short supervisor note. Today, we're just focusing on a section from here, from the Managing My Students, Thesis Submission and Examination section. Now, all research degree students for their thesis have to have 2 examiners nominated, and 3 is excellent in case one becomes unavailable. You do need 2 of them, and they have to be high quality individuals. Okay, so and high quality in terms of being really good researchers and being in institutions which enable those people to do good research. Initially, the initial contact is from the supervisors, you directly to them, and that can be quite an informal process. And they have to satisfy a number of attributes. Firstly, and you'd hope, they would be research active, and so and that's I'm sure that all of you would be able to tell if someone's research active or not. And that research should be high quality research, and these 2 aspects seem pretty self-explanatory and pretty obvious. They also have to hold a PhD if they're to examine a PhD. If they're examining a master's degree, they have to at least hold a master's degree. So that's a general rule of thumb. Now, sometimes that there are exceptions to that, and that can be where someone has particular relevant industry experience, and that cases can be made for that to happen. Now, another attribute that's required is some supervision experience, and the university doesn't like to approve people to examine a thesis who haven't themselves supervised a thesis to completion. Now, this doesn't always hold true, but pretty much always. We're expecting examiners to have a pretty deep understanding of the PhD process. And it's also desirable that they've also examined before. Now, as a general rule of thumb, more experienced researchers who've been in research for a longer period tend to make better examiners, and they tend to be able to cut to the essence and the quality of a thesis without trying to impose themselves on what that thesis should look like. It's desirable for someone who has already done this in the past, but of course, everyone has to start somewhere. So there is a chance that you could be asking someone to examine a thesis and they could be doing it for the first time. We try to avoid that if we can, but so that's why this is only a desirable one. Really important that the examiner has to be independent from, well, first of all, each other. They can't be working together, and it seems crazy, but sometimes examiners are nominated who are married, for instance, at the same institution working together, and that's not acceptable. And they also have to be independent from yourself and the student, and that can be evidence for that might be on their CV or on your CV where jointly publishing together. Now, you may have jointly published with this person in the past, but the strength and the frequency of those collaborations would be examined. So we are looking for independence. Now, you need to provide evidence when nominating examiners, and it does have to be the examiner's CV, and not just one of those quickly whacked together CVs, very, very super brief, listing a few key recent publications. It really does have to be a proper CV. Now, that might be a brief CV, 4 or 5 pages, as long as it's got the evidence in there about their employment history, ideally thesis supervision and examination experience. Now, a lot of CVs won't have that in there about what theses have been examined. If it's not in there, you should go back to that examiner and say, even by email, and say, could you please just confirm for me that you've examined or supervised PhD students before, or you've been involved in mentoring, or if it's the United States, on the committee system before. You can just ask them for that by email, and then that information can be put up with the nomination of examiners. Don't be afraid to ask potential examiners for this information. Almost every university worth its salt in this country will have such a screening process for examiners, because it's crucial for quality examination. If a potential examiner doesn't have time to give you this information, or they bite back and say, oh, well, I can't believe all of this administration, you're better off not going with them, because examiners who do this all the time and who know the system will not complain. They will understand. They'll also understand if they're not chosen. It happens sometimes. Universities will choose particular examiners or reject particular examiners because of perceived conflicts. Now, those conflicts may be minor and may not amount to anything. But this is a protection mechanism for the student, for you, and the university, and it's really critical. So if a potential examiner, you're afraid to ask them for information, well, first of all, don't be. And if they give you grief about it, you're better off just letting them go and not pursuing it, and finding someone who actually, is willing to, to do this and will not bark about it, because this is really common practice, and people do put up their CVs to get screened to be examiners at other universities all the time. So don't be afraid to ask for information. How do you do it? You do it through the research portal, and you don't have to wait until the student submits their thesis. You can do it before. And maybe in a month or two before, you can start getting this process together. Now, the examiners need to be approved by the local research degree coordinator. That might be me or one of the other RDCs in the school. They call them REPLs in other places too. And what might happen is the local RDC may sort of do a bit of to and fro with you about, oh, look, I'm not sure about this examiner. Can you please provide some more information? And look, if you could please cooperate with that process, that would be fantastic, because the dean, a local dean, has to approve these examiners. And what we try to do at the school level is make sure we only put up really good examiners. So, we all just need to work together on this process. The reality is most examiners are approved through nomination, and, but this bears out in some excellent results for our students. If you have queries about the process, please do contact Research Degrees Coordinator or myself, and I'll be happy to address those queries. So hopefully this helps you, just sort of dig a little bit deeper into the process about nominating examiners for PhD and master's thesis. Thanks.